Ladies and gentlemen, I know it sounds counterintuitive, but Mitt Romney is basically on Trump's side. And of course, he voted to convict during impeachment. And Bill Cassidy, by the way, voted 89.1%, almost 90% of the time, alongside President Trump. As senator for Louisiana, he voted to convict President Trump. And Senator Bill Cassidy says, I feel good about vote to convict Trump. And then today he said, oh, well, you know what? He won't be the GOP nominee. That's a bunch of nonsense. A couple of days ago, Mitt Romney said that if President Trump runs, and he will almost certainly, Romney says he's pretty sure Trump would win 2024 GOP nomination. CNN, Romney says he's pretty sure Trump will win 2024 nomination if he runs. The Jerusalem Post, Mitt Romney claims Trump would win Republican nomination in 2024. Fox News, Romney says Trump likely a Republican nominee if he runs in 2024. NBC News, Romney says Trump would win GOP nominee in a landslide in 2024. So, New York Times, Trump predicts Trump would win. Romney predicts Trump would win in 2024 GOP nomination if he ran for president. Romney pretty sure, The Hill, Romney pretty sure Trump would win 2024 GOP nomination. That's all you needed from the conservative political action speech. So you're going to hear the speech, and I'm going to have a segment and a live stream later tonight to talk about it. Everyone on the planet who's interested in politics is either waiting to hear it, or waiting to talk about it, or waiting to give an analysis, whether it's favorable or unfavorable. You cannot say, if you're Bill Cassidy or if you're the Lincoln Project rejects who are now completely disgraced, or if you're the governor of New York, whose political career is tanking faster than, he's like the political Titanic. You look at the Lincoln Project that are basically nobody wants to touch with a 10-foot pole, completely and utterly disgraced. You have Cuomo heading in that direction, almost there. The New York Times, you have Democrats in New York that are leveling accusations and want him out. They want him impeached. Okay, and guess what? He's on his way out with his horrendous decision making that led to loss of thousands upon thousands of human beings. Because, I mean, here's a man who was propped up. See, Trump runs a 40-yard dash with a 100-pound backpack. And Bill Cassidy says, well, we lost, the seats in the Senate. You had a Republican Party that investigated a Republican president based on a dossier that Clinton purchased and the DNC purchased. What do you expect? The fact that Congress wasn't lost sooner is pretty amazing. What do you expect? I mean, the fact that the Senate wasn't lost sooner. What do you expect? Then you had a pandemic that wasn't Trump's fault. You go look at Cuomo in New York. Look what's happening in New York. The worst outcomes were in Democratic-run states with Murphy and New York's governor and Whitmer and Pritzker and all the top. And then you have, that's according to the New York Times statistics, the greatest number of lives lost in terms of aggregate numbers. Go to the New York Times. I'm not making it up. 7 of the top 10 with the top states, with the states with the greatest number of lives lost are Democratic-run states. How is that Trump's fault? They didn't listen to Trump. They didn't want to listen to Trump. Then they say, well, he could have helped us. Like, well, you weren't going to listen to him anyway. You think that Democratic governors were just waiting and, hoping that Trump would give them some wisdom? They didn't want to listen to anything Trump said. And so they had the highest unemployment rates also. The top 12, go to the Bureau of Labor Statistics. The top 12 states with the highest unemployment rates are Democratic-run states. Hit subscribe to this channel right now. Tell your friends about this channel. Go to hagoodman.com. Read my writing in The Hill, The Huffington Post, Salon, The Jerusalem Post, The Federalist, The Daily Caller, other publications, The Roanoke Times. See my debates. If you want to support my voice long term, my Patreon is below. But ladies and gentlemen, Romney is already on Trump's side because he already has admitted that only one person runs the Republican Party. Only one person runs the Republican Party. Actually, it was a pretty honest display. So, Romney was among 7 Republican senators who joined Democrats in favor of convicting Trump in a second impeachment trial. Okay, that would never have happened. With the current Democratic Party, would never have happened. Number one. Number two, you can look at. First of all, there shouldn't have been protests that day. There should have been a national dialogue, discourse, debate, discussion President Trump should have fostered. There's a million ways he could have done that. Twitter was the worst vehicle, the worst medium to do that. And those 5 people should be alive today, but that was conducted by people who had nothing to do with President Trump. He didn't have any, he wouldn't have had those protests that day had he known that people were thinking about that. He did not compel or tell anyone to do anything. That's a very vapid, sophomoric argument. Well, his argument drove people nuts. No. These people, you have, this is the thing. Democrats view supporters of President Trump as mindless, ignorant, gullible, impressionable people, which in many cases, they're looking into the mirror. If you watch CNN and MSNBC all day and you think Trump's taxes are linked to Putin, you're the one with problems. But those people who did what they did, that woman, those 5 people should be alive today. That wasn't Trump. Okay? He didn't tell people to do anything. He wouldn't have had the protest had he known that was a he should have known it was a possibility. That's one thing. So that's a different story. But if you want to hold Trump by those standards, then we had 5 to 6 months where Democrats were bailing out people who were arrested. And you can't just say, well, that's for a good cause. Yeah, but there's no cause worthy of 19 lives lost, according to Wikipedia, $1 to $2 billion in property damage. How are you going to say 19 lives lost is more, okay, I'm not going to get into it, but 19 lives lost defeats the purpose of what the protests were about. And $1 to $2 billion in property damage. How many Black-owned and Latino-owned businesses were destroyed? I mean, it's not only counterproductive, it makes, you look at the damage, and Democrats swept it under the rug. CNN, fiery but peaceful, with the building in flames in the background, where the journalist said, yeah, everything's peaceful, mostly. What they don't get, it's that you could make the same argument, it was mostly peaceful. Except a couple people did something horrendous, and 5 people should be alive. But here, I look at the polls, this is what Romney said, I look at the polls, and the polls show that among the names being floated as potential contenders in 2024, if you put President Trump in there among Republicans, he wins in a landslide. And that's the truth. That's the truth. And you would have, you have what? Something like 66%, 50 to 66% of Republican voters who would leave the GOP with Trump if Trump started a new political entity. So it's and then it's been 1 month. You see what President Biden has done in terms of foreign policy. I voted for President Trump to remove Americans from that region of the world. He tried to. And guess what? His intelligence officials and Pentagon officials lied to him. They reveled in that. They were gleeful. Yeah, we didn't tell Trump the true number of Americans there. And so now President Biden conducted a foreign policy tactic, which I'm speaking in roundabout terms because, my God, it's really tough to navigate the waters nowadays. That's why when I try to make my headlines as bland as possible. Pretty soon it'll be Trump good, Democrats bad, and then that's it. That'll be the headline. But lots of good things took place, something like that. But anyway, we shouldn't be there. To protect a presence in a region of the world we shouldn't be in makes no sense. Basic logic Foreign policy should be predicated upon basic logic, not the mistakes of President Obama. President Obama got us into that region. We were not. That's even Bush didn't get us into that region where that specific country is. Okay, even Bush didn't get us into it, and Bush was the worst president of all time. He started us on a course of never-ending conflict. We shouldn't be there. There's no reason for there. Well, Russia's there. So what? U.S. foreign policy has never been simply about acting in spite. If you want to say, well, during the Cold War, we had a policy of containment, and well, guess what? Those days are over. They had to rekindle those days because they lost and they needed to save face. Nobody believes that Trump worked with Putin to buy Facebook ads. The whole thing was an absurd tinfoil hat fantasy that they now claim. See, they don't think of that as undermining democracy. They go, well, James Clapper said, and John Radcliffe said Caligula, Biden's son's emails weren't hacked and they weren't part of Russia. Or they weren't linked to Russia. But social media algorithms were all based on that absurd lie. Okay, nobody calls out the lies that actually affect people's lives. It rhymes a bit. You have 7 senators, you have a whole bunch of Republicans in Congress. In 2022, you're going to have it's a different ballgame. The politicians, the Republican politicians who voted against or tried to undermine Trump, you're going to see primaried, and most of them, not all of them, but most of them will lose their seats. You will have finally a Republican Party that stands by President Trump, that champions. See, it's not, they try to say it like you like people like Trump because of his personality. It has nothing to do with the worship of anybody. That's just another absurd claim. We had record low unemployment throughout most of his tenure. President Trump allocated more funding to historically black colleges and universities than any president ever. Nobody knows this. Okay, Trump, because of his Twitter presence, allowed them to erase all his achievements because he just kept on being belligerent. He should never be on Twitter again. President Trump presided. He was the first president to step foot in North Korea. President Moon Jae-in stated that Trump deserved the Nobel Peace Prize. He presided over the Abraham Accords, peace between Israel, UAE, Bahrain, Morocco, and the beginning of peace with other countries. Formal recognition is a huge accomplishment. People say, whoa, it wasn't that big of a deal. It's like, yes, it was a big deal. That's why it was such a big deal that President Obama and Bush never even tried to accomplish what Trump accomplished. Okay, then you had economic deals between Serbia and Kosovo. You had tariffs that were working. Tariffs, yes. Not the Trans-Pacific Partnership. You had an emphasis on protecting the First Amendment, protecting the Second Amendment. This is important when you want to defund police. The same people on the left, and I know who these people are. If they needed the police, they would call in 2 seconds. And then they might be people who say, "Oh yeah, look, defund." Like, no, you would call in 2 seconds, and you don't fix it. You don't look. There's medical malpractice at times. There's there are surgeons that make mistakes that operate on the wrong body part. You don't cancel. You don't abolish or defund hospitals. You change, you ensure that the mistakes don't happen again. So that's the left is only about emotion. If they did, look, Jimmy Kimmel, Stephen Colbert, Trevor Noah, and the other who's the NBC Tonight Show, no, not Tonight Show, Jimmy Fallon. Every night, almost every night, late night is dominated by, despising, disparaging Trump. Almost every single night. What if you had the opposite? What if they were making fun and mocking Democrats? What if you had MSNBC, CNN, The Washington Post, The New York Times, Vanity Fair, Esquire, Rolling Stone, Daily Beast, Mother Jones, The Nation, Elle, Cosmo. You can look at, it's pretty much almost every single publication either devotes its existence to disparaging and demeaning and undermining and trying to denigrate Trump, or Vanity. I said Vanity Fair. I said Esquire. I said. There's all of these. You have the Washington Post, the New York Times, but then you have the Atlantic, Time Magazine. You can't. Anywhere you look in American society, there's some industry leveled directly against Trump, and he's still the number one, the number one force in Republican politics. And so when Mitt Romney, tells the world, hey, you know what, he has the nomination in the bag. That's an admission. That's Romney's on Trump's side, which you might not. That's actually the best thing that could ever happen to President Trump is Mitt Romney admitting that Trump runs the Republican Party. See what happens, when you don't have President Trump on Twitter, when he's not on Twitter, you see what happens. Now suddenly they have to actually reflect. Now a person like Mitt Romney has to say, gosh, I think he's probably going to win the whole thing. Again, GOP nomination, there's nobody can touch him. Now you have media lamenting, this sorrow. Really? It's just this weird worship. It's not a worship, you imbeciles. It's not a worship. Nobody worships President Trump. They like his policies. You don't have policies. Democrats don't have policies. They promised a stimulus check. This is what they do. They tank economies. Because the lowest unemployment rates are in Nebraska, Iowa, red states. South Dakota. These are red states. The highest unemployment rates are in states that gleefully tank their economies. Yeah. And then they had the worst outcomes in terms of the pandemic. So, you tanked your economy, and then, interestingly, the way Democrats work is if you don't listen to every single thing, if you don't worship everything they say, and something horrible happens to you, you see, you didn't listen. They had the worst outcomes. And the red states had the best outcomes in terms of the pandemic, in terms of aggregate numbers, and also, in many cases, in terms of per capita. The highest per capita rates, it was 6 out of 10, top 6 out of the 10 highest per capita rates are Democratic-run states, and many of those states have the greatest populations, which is why Jonathan Swan, when he tried to ambush Trump in that interview, when you have states like New York and New Jersey, and God bless the people of New York and New Jersey, they deserve better than Cuomo and Murphy. But when you have states with the most populous states who also have the highest per capita rates, it's going to affect the entire country. He should have simply said, hey, you know what? Other countries, whether it's Germany or South Korea, they don't have Cuomo of New York or Phil Murphy. He could have said that, but he didn't. But anyway, give me your thoughts below. You're going to hear him speak at this moment, and ladies and gentlemen, it's going to be pretty amazing. Give me your